in support of the futures of the young. I know that is exactly what Bernie Sanders is fighting for. He is fighting for our futures in America. Our futures as college students is not looking so good right now. Why? Because student loans are going to be drowning our financial futures when we college students have to pay student loans that are up to $600 a month. When I graduate college, I know I will not be able to afford that much each month. This will make it difficult for me to contribute to the economy, like buying a car, buying a house, or even starting a family. Bernie Sanders' College for All plan will help students build a life outside of school. As a student that studies environmental issues every day, I know how urgent the climate crisis is all over. Climate change is contributing to devastating events in the world like sea level rise, increased droughts in the southeast, coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef, and even an increase in wildfires in California. Climate change is even affecting New Hampshire at a fast rate. There are ecological collapses of tree species including beech, maple, and hemlock, which are all important species for deer during the winter. The New Hampshire ski industry will lose a large amount of profits due to the loss of 10 to 20% of ski days. All these issues are going to continue to grow if we do not do something right now. Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal will help combat climate change by investing in renewable energy, help create clean energy jobs, and he will stop the multi-billionaire fossil fuel companies from buying other politicians' opinions. Our future is lying in front of us. What are we going to do to fix it? Are we going to get out there and vote, or are we going to sit complacent and watch our futures deteriorate in front of our eyes? It is important for us as young people to get out to the polls and rock the vote. This is my future, and I am not going to sit still and let other people decide my fate. Bernie Sanders is with us young people, and he sees the struggles we are going through. He is fighting for our future, and it is our turn to fight with Bernie Sanders as a future president in 2020. And now I am honored to introduce the iconic Congresswoman Omar.
than Minnesota. And I brought my big coat, and then I came and it was 35 degree-ish. And I'm like, this is summer. This is Minnesota is like 10 degrees at the moment. I am so excited to have the opportunity today to be here with you all and to welcome a champion of justice, a fighter, and a man I trust, Senator Bernie Sanders. The media and many political pundits have labels they place on Senator Bernie and myself, and sometimes we get the same titles. And one that they like to use is radical. Well, here's the truth. If believing that 500,000 Americans should not be forced into medical bankruptcy every single year is radical, then we're proud to be radical. If believing 26-year-old Alex from my hometown should not have died because he had to ration his insulin is radical, then I am proud to be radical. If believing that mental health, vision health, dental health should be guaranteed to all Americans is something that they consider radical, then we should all be proud to be radicals. And if believing that the opioid crisis is a public health crisis that could only be defeated by guaranteeing Medicare for all Americans, and that idea should be considered radical, then I am proud to be radical. See, I believe that public education is public good. Education should be extended to college. Every student should have a fair shot at an American dream. If that is radical, then we should all be proud to be radical. And if you believe that we should have Wall Street pay to cancel out student debt is radical, then we should all consider ourselves radicals. Here's another thing Bernie and I believe, is that no child should be subjected to shame and harassment because they can't afford lunch. And no student should have their meal thrown out because they have $15 debt. And if you believe that that is insane, you should consider yourself radical too. If being bothered by the fact that there are homeless people sleeping on the side of the streets in frigid weather in New Hampshire and in Minnesota is radical, then we should all be proud to be radical. If believing that 2 million Americans should not be evicted every single year because they can't afford rent is considered radical, then I am also very proud to be radical. I happen to believe that climate change is an existential threat to humanity. And believing that climate crisis and refugee crisis are linked. If it will take a global refugee pact to make sure climate refugees who lose their homes are welcomed with open arms and not shut out by a cringe fest. If that thought is radical, then we should all consider ourselves radicals. If you are like me and you have moral outrage that we continue to give the fossil fuel industry $20 billion in corporate welfare system, and you believe, like me, that that is one welfare system we should get rid of, then you should consider yourself radicals as well. And here's my favorite one. If you believe that it's time to end the waste we generate each year that's fueling our climate crisis is radical, then everybody should consider themselves radicals. I happen to believe that we cannot continue to ship jobs overseas and pay workers pennies on the dollar while laying off highly skilled union workers at home. And I believe with all my heart that my destiny, your destiny, the destiny of workers around the world are linked together. If that belief is radical, then I am so proud to be radical. The truth is, the only radicalism we are motivated by is radical love. That's why we're calling on everyone to be moved radically by love for their neighbors, for their country, for our democracy, and for humanity. Bernie Sanders has been motivated by radical love his whole life, and he has never wavered. This is the same agenda that motivated Dr. Martin Luther King. A year before he was murdered, Dr. King gave a speech in which he warned us of the three evils facing America: the evils of racism, the evils of poverty, and the evil of war. He launched the Poor People's Campaign, building a multi-racial working class coalition to end these evils in the United States. This is the movement we must emulate. And this is why we are here to organize. And that's the only way we can defeat the dark cloud of hate hanging over America. Bernie's work ever since he was a young student in the civil rights movement is an extension of the radical love Martin Luther King was fighting for. So I want everybody in this room to be radically moved. I want you all to be moved by the love you have for your neighbors and for your country. To be moved by the love that you have for the sanctity of humanity. To organize and to mobilize so that we can bring about change. Being radical means you believe in the idea that politics can be a vehicle of bringing joy into people's lives. It's because of my radical love for our country that I am here today. And I am radically and I am so radically excited to introduce our next president, Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, stay here for a second. Let me thank all of you for being out here this afternoon. Let me especially thank Ilhan Omar for being here. Because I want you to know that you're looking at one of the extraordinary people in American politics in Ilhan. This is we talk about the American dream. We talk about what America is supposed to be. You are looking at a woman who fled civil war in Somalia, who spent 4 years in a refugee camp in Kenya, and became the first Muslim congressman in the history of our country. And this is a woman, she doesn't talk about it, but she has stood up to some of the most ugly racism ever thrown at a member of the United States Congress, and she has stood up with pride and dignity. And we are so proud of Ilhan Omar. And I want to thank Dean Harlem for the music. I want to thank Travis Bennett, our organizer who made a field pitch. Want to reiterate, he wants you, I want you to get heavily involved in this campaign. So please do it. And I want to thank Stephen Dennis and Juliana LaRue for their remarks as well. And certainly, I want to thank the Congresswoman for her thoughts. Look, let me cut to the chase here and tell you that we are living in an unprecedented and difficult moment in American history. That's the fact. And I wish I could tell you that, maybe we can do a little tinkering around the edges over here and do a little bit of tinkering around there and everything's going to be just great. But if I told you that, it would not be true. We are living in a country where we have a president who is a pathological liar, a president who is running the most corrupt administration in the modern history of our country, and you're going to be hearing more about that in the coming weeks as the impeachment process unwinds. You are looking at a president, and it gives me no joy to say this. I have conservative friends who I disagree with politically, intellectually, but you have a president who is a racist, who is a sexist, who is a homophobe and a xenophobe and a religious bigot. And that is not somebody who should remain in the Oval Office of this country. And together, we are going to end that. I know that in New Hampshire and in Vermont and all over this country, President Trump has his supporters. I get that. But I would hope that people understand that this election is more than just the important issues facing our country. And I'm going to talk about them in a moment. It has something to do with character. It has something to do with temperament. It has something to do without making major policies through a tweet in the middle of the night. It has something to do with a president who, in an unprecedented way, is trying to divide our people up based on the color of our skin, where we were born, our sexual orientation, our religion, trying to divide people up, what America is about and is supposed to be about, and what every president, conservative, moderate, progressive, must understand. The function of the President of the United States is to bring people together as Americans, not divide us up. Our campaign asks a lot of the people of this country. We ask people to think outside of the box, to go beyond what members of Congress talk about, what the media talks about, and ask the fundamental questions about what is going on in our country and how can we bring about the changes that we need. And I learned a long time ago that it is far more important to ask the right questions than to give the right answers. Anybody can give you an answer, but it is much harder to ask the right questions. So here are just a few of those questions. How does it happen that we live in a nation today where billionaires are able to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to buy elections? Now, I come from Vermont. Many of you are from New Hampshire. We have town meetings, not different than this, where people come together and they argue about the school budget or the road budget or the municipal budget in general. And then at the end of the meeting, they raise their hands, yes or no, and majority rules. Billionaires do not control what happens. It's one person, one vote. And what this campaign is about is to make certain that once again in America, we will return to a democracy of one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. The other issue that we have got to throw on the table, and we got to talk about, which you don't hear much discussion in the media or in Congress about, is economic justice. Economic justice. Ilhan was talking about Dr. King and justice, and I believe that. Right now, what you have in America is more income and wealth inequality than at any time since the 1920s. In the richest country in the history of the world, which is what we are now, you got three people who now own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. You got that? Now, we don't talk about it enough. You don't see it on the television. But that is not what a democracy is supposed to be about, and that is not what a vibrant economy is about. So today we say very loudly and clearly to the billionaire class whose wealth has increased enormously in the last 20 or 30 years, we say to them that we're going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. Love you too. Now, at a time when half of the people in our country, in a so-called good economy, half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. You all know what that means, paycheck to paycheck? It means that a senior citizen here in New Hampshire is trying to get by on $14,000, $15,000 a year, and I don't know how she or he can do that. It means there are workers trying to get by on 9, 10, 11 bucks an hour and provide for their kids, and I don't know how you can do that. It means there are millions of people in this country who, when they get sick, cannot afford to go to the doctor. That's living paycheck to paycheck. So what our campaign is about and what our administration will be about is standing up for the working class of this country. And what that means, not complicated. It means that if you work 40 hours a week in New Hampshire or Vermont or any place else, you're not going to be living in poverty, because we're going to raise the federal minimum wage to at least 15 bucks an hour. It means equal pay for equal work. It means that we're going to make it easier for workers to join unions. It means that we are going to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. That is our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, the affordable housing that we need all over this country. And when we rebuild our crumbling infrastructure with good-paying jobs, we can create up to 20 million good jobs. That's what we can do. Nelson Mandela made a profound statement. This is what he said. He said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." You all know what that means? It always seems impossible until it is done. What does that mean? Help me out here. All right, what else does it mean? What? That's right. All right, it means all of these things. Here's what it means. It means that right now, and historically, the establishment, the media always, oh, you can't accomplish it. You're thinking too big. 100 years ago, they told women, you want to vote? You want to go to college? You want to be a doctor? Are you crazy? That is not what women are supposed to do. 150 years ago, they told workers, you want to engage in collective bargaining and form a union? Who do you think you are? I'm the boss, you're the worker, you listen to me. You have no rights on the job. Over history, they told the African-American population in our country that you will continue to be second-class citizens. You will not have the right to vote because of the color of your skin. You can't drink in that water fountain. Your kid can't go to that school because you're black. They told the gay community, you really think you have a right to marry somebody despite their gender? You're crazy. That's not what it's done. People stood up and they fought back and they said, you, the establishment, will not define who I am. We will define who we are ourselves. And then, apropos of what Mandela said, after it is done, it is no big deal. People now laugh when we say 100 years ago women didn't have the right to vote. How crazy is that? It wasn't crazy 100 years ago, but women had to struggle for that. That gay marriage exists in every state in the country today. Young people don't even know. What's the big deal? You know, younger generation doesn't even understand the struggle that went on forever for gay rights and gay marriage. Because it's there. What's the problem? Of course people have a right to marry whoever they want. And where we are right now, in this moment in history, is for us to think big, to accomplish our agenda so that 50 years from now, people will look back when you talk to your grandchildren and say, you know, Grandma, I don't really believe that you're telling me that in America 500,000 people slept out on the streets when a handful of billionaires controlled the economy. I don't believe you. You're telling me that there were people in America who could not go to the doctor when they were sick. That's crazy, Grandma. You're getting old. It can't be. That was not what happened in America. That's the point. The point is that the ideas that today are not discussed on the television, are not discussed in the Congress, those are the ideas that we have got to bring forth and fight for so that our kids and grandchildren will nod their heads and say, of course, that's what should have happened. Four years ago, when I campaigned in New Hampshire, I made the point, seems to me an obvious point. People are, I think, understanding it better. I said 4 years ago, you know, we talk about public education in America, looking at somebody who went to public schools. Right now, free public education, K through 12, great. And that's been around for about 100 years. Well, the world has changed in 100 years. Technology has changed. The global economy has changed. And when we talk about public education right now, we have got to make certain that we're talking about making public colleges and universities tuition free. Radical idea? I don't think so. What you're seeing is cities and states all over the country moving in exactly that direction. Here's another. You ready for another radical idea? 11 years ago, against my vote, Congress bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who nearly destroyed our economy. 2 years ago, Trump and his friends gave $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large profitable corporations. My view is that if Congress could do that for the rich and the powerful, we can and must cancel all student debt in America. And as Ilhan mentioned a moment ago, we're going to do that through a modest tax on Wall Street speculation. I have believed for my entire adult life that health care is a human right and not a privilege. Does not seem to me to be a radical idea for us to be living in a country where when you are sick, you go to the doctor regardless of the income of your family. Not a radical idea. Doesn't seem to me to be a radical idea that if you end up in a hospital with a serious procedure, that you could leave that hospital and not be one of the 500,000 Americans who go bankrupt because of medically related bills. It seems to me a little bit crazy that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, despite the fact that we are spending twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other nation. Seems to me a little bit crazy. So maybe, just maybe, we should create a health care system which is designed to provide quality care to all of our people, and not a system designed to make the insurance companies and the drug companies filthy rich. In terms of Medicare for all, which is what we are fighting for, we are taking on, obviously, the insurance companies and the drug companies who made $100 billion in profits last year, while 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the medicine they need because we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. So let me be very clear and say to the pharmaceutical industry, we are going to take on the greed, the corruption, and the price fixing, which is charging us here in America by far the highest prices in the world for drugs. We're going to take that on. We are going to lower prescription drug costs in America, and under Medicare for all, nobody in this country will have to pay more than $200 a year for the prescription drugs they need. Now, there are a lot of issues that are out there, all of which are important. But there is one issue which is so important, not only to our country, but to the entire world. And that is, as Ilhan mentioned, the existential crisis of climate change. It will come as no secret to anybody in this room that I disagree with Trump on virtually everything. But on this issue, what he is doing by claiming that climate change is a hoax, by actually attacking Greta Thunberg, what he is doing is not only endangering our country, but the entire world. So let me tell you, not something that I came up with. I failed physics when I was in college, so I can't tell you I'm a great science student. But I do listen to the scientists. And what the scientists are telling us with regard to climate change is that what they had previously believed to be the case turned out to be inaccurate. They underestimated the degree and severity at which climate change is ravaging our country and the entire world. The polar ice caps are melting much faster than they had anticipated. The ocean is warming, and that means that in the United States and all over the world, coastal cities and communities will be increasingly underwater. And I'm talking about Miami and Charleston, South Carolina, New York City by the end of the century. We're talking about Bangladesh, Vietnam, low-level countries all over the world. What we are talking about is an increase in drought. Right now, as we speak, parts of Australia are on fire. Unprecedented levels of wildfires in Australia. And God, everybody here knows what has been happening in California. What we will see if the droughts continue and we don't get a handle on climate change is the growing season for farmers in the Midwest and many other parts of the world will shorten, which means that crop production will go down and the quality of food produced will go down, leading to hunger and to higher food prices. What we will be seeing is more extreme weather disturbances, such as the one recently which put Venice, Italy underwater and did terrible damage to Houston, Texas. Unprecedented levels of rainfall in a short period of time. What you're seeing is fish in a warmer ocean at a time when billions of people are dependent upon fish for their protein. Fish dying, species dying, fish moving away from their normal habitat. What you are also seeing, according to the United Nations, is if climate change continues to get worse, there will be hundreds of millions of climate refugees all over the world. People who can no longer live in their communities because there is no clean water to drink, no land to grow their crops. And when you have hundreds of millions of people on the move, you have very, very serious national security issues. And we have a president who thinks all of these things is a hoax. Well, as President of the United States, I will not believe that it is a hoax. I will believe and do believe that climate change is an existential threat to our country and the world. And that means passing a Green New Deal, and I'm very proud to tell you that our campaign has introduced a proposal which is the most comprehensive and sweeping climate change proposal ever introduced by a candidate for federal office. Now, I have been criticized, as I am every day for one thing or another, but I've been criticized because this is an expensive proposal. It pays for itself, but it is an expensive proposal. $16.7 trillion, a lot of money over a 10-year period. But I want you all to think when you hear that my proposal is expensive, I want you to think about the alternative. How much is too much if we are fighting to save the planet? And the good news is that when we talk about a Green New Deal, which is what our plan is based upon, we're talking about creating many, many millions of jobs as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Here in New Hampshire and in Vermont and all over this country, you got older buildings that need to be retrofitted, need more insulation, need more roofing, different roofing, need better windows. That in itself, producing those products in America and installing those products will create many, many jobs. We have got to invest many billions of dollars in wind, solar, and other sustainable energies. So this is a huge issue. And anyone who is not prepared to tackle that issue is really turning their backs on their own children and future generation. And we have a moral responsibility not to do that. And I'll tell you something else, because everything, when you run for president, you see everything related to everything else. I mean, it's not like separate issues, they're all related. And in this one, I want you to think, when you think outside of the box, I'll give you just two examples, same thing. 50 years ago, we had doctors going on television smoking cigarettes, telling the people how good tasting those cigarettes, how healthy they were for you. We had members of the tobacco industry lining up before Congress, standing up and swearing to tell the truth and telling members of Congress that tobacco was not unhealthy for people. And the result of that is that millions of people died, including my father, who smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. In fact, during World War II, we gave out cigarettes to the soldiers, getting them addicted to tobacco, all right? And now you have a situation where you have the fossil fuel industry, who has some very smart scientists, who have known for decades what carbon emission means in terms of global warming. They have known it. And then instead of facing the reality and moving to sustainable energy, they lied. And they put many millions of dollars into obfuscation campaigns, saying, well, we're not sure, we have to study it, different opinions. They knew the truth. Those people who knew the truth and lied about what carbon emissions are doing to this planet have got to be held accountable. And when you talk about corporate greed and corporate corruption, that issue of the fossil fuel industry lying to the American people is not radically different than what the manufacturers of opioids did as well. And I know what impact the opioid epidemic has had on this state, to Vermont as well, but here more. You had people in the pharmaceutical industry, people who manufactured the opioids, know. It's not like they didn't know. We can forgive people for producing a product, and that happens. You produce a product, you don't know fully what the impact is. These guys learned about the fact that many, many, many thousands of people were becoming addicted to these opioids. And you know what they did? They hired more salespeople to go out and sell them even more aggressively, because money was more important than the lives of tens of thousands of people in this country. And that is a kind of corporate, not only greed, but corporate ugliness and corporate corruption that we have got to take on in this campaign and as an administration. In America today, when we talk about a progressive agenda, one of the things that must be part of any progressive agenda is dealing with our broken and racist criminal justice system. So what our administration will be about is investing in young people, in jobs and education, not more jails and incarceration. We will be about ending cash bail so that 400,000 people do not stay behind bars today because they're too poor to get bail. We are about ending private prisons and detention centers. And we are about ending the incredibly destructive war on drugs. And that means that we will legalize marijuana in every state in this country. It means that we will expunge the records of those arrested for possession of marijuana. And when we talk about a progressive agenda, we will end the war against women in this country. I get a little bit tired of hearing my conservative colleagues in the Senate talk about how they believe in small government and getting government off the backs of the American people. If you believe in getting government off the backs of the American people, then understand that it is a woman, not the government, who has the right to control her own life. And here is my promise to you, is that I will never nominate someone for the U.S. Supreme Court who is not 100% pro Roe v. Wade. And when we talk about justice in America, we have got to end the demonization of the undocumented immigrants in this country. And that means moving aggressively, and I think we can pass it. I think there is bipartisan support. I think the American people want us to go forward for comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. We will end the current border policy, because under my administration, no federal agent will ever snatch a baby away from the arms of her mother. And on day one, we will pass executive orders ending all of Trump's racist executive orders on immigration. And on day one, we will reestablish legal status for the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. I know that you share with me the horror that we experience when we turn on the TV or we read the papers and find out there's been another mass shooting someplace in America. And it appears that it just never ends. One terrible, terrible shooting after another. We lose about 40,000 people a year to gun violence, but the problem goes even deeper than that. I have talked to parents, and in fact, I am the grandfather of kids who are in schools in New Hampshire right now, where they undergo drills in order to figure out how they can best deal with some horrible situation. Can you imagine that? That our kids or our grandchildren right now are thinking about how they can escape some horrible, horrible situation. A woman in Iowa mentioned to me that, what am I supposed to say to my daughter when she asked me to get her a bulletproof backpack, which I guess they sell. So a guy who was 6'2", guy looks like a football player to me, saying, you know what, I got to tell you, Senator, that in my school, kids are afraid to go to school. Our job as an administration will be to make it very clear that the gun policies we develop will not be dictated by the NRA. They will be dictated by the American people. And the good news there is that what we have seen, because of all of these horrible situations, because of the young people in this country standing up and fighting for sensible gun policy, what we have seen is a significant coming together of rural states like Vermont and New Hampshire with urban communities, Los Angeles, Detroit. We have seen gun owners and non-gun owners come together. and understand that we need universal and expanded background checks. That we need to end the so-called gun show loophole. That we need to end the straw man provision, which allows people to legally buy guns and then sell them to criminal elements. And you know what? As people observe these terrible events, a significant majority of the American people now believe, as I have for 30 years, that we must ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. Let me just say what you already know, that New Hampshire plays a very outsized role in the political process in this country. You are the first primary state, you're the second state to vote behind Iowa. And I know that the people of New Hampshire take that responsibility very seriously. I know that you go out, today you're here to hear me, and tomorrow you go out to hear another candidate. You want to assess what the candidates are saying, what you agree with and what you don't agree with. And that is exactly what should be happening in a democracy. But I guess what I want to say to you today is that our campaign is a little bit different than other campaigns. Obviously, I want your support to help us win here in New Hampshire, and I think we can do that. I want your support to help me become the Democratic nominee and to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. But those goals are not unique to my campaign. Every one of the other 15 candidates that come here is going to tell you exactly the same thing. But I'll tell you what is unique to our campaign. What is unique is I am running for president not just to defeat Trump, as important as that is. I'm running for president to work with you and millions of Americans to transform this country and create a government and economy that works for all, not just the 1%. The message of our campaign is us, not me. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, it suggests the view that we are all in this together. That our view of life is radically different than Trump's and some of his billionaire friends who think that lying, cheating, and stealing, so long as you can make more and more money, is what human life is about. Our view is different. We believe that we are in this together, that my family has got to help your family has got to help my family, and that we have to create a nation and government based on justice for all. And the second part of that message, us, not me, is something you will not see on television. Not, as we say in Vermont, till the cows come home. And that is an understanding of power structure in America. You all know what I mean by that? Okay, who has the power in America? So I can run, hey, vote for me, and I'm going to do A, B, and C. I'm a great guy. But you have to ask yourselves, how does it happen, after all of the speeches and presidents and great campaigns, the average American worker today is not making a nickel more in real inflation accounted for dollars than he or she did 45 years ago? How does it happen that 500,000 people are sleeping out on the streets tonight? How does it happen that 87 million people are uninsured or underinsured after all the great speeches and all the ideas, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that? And the answer is that we have a corporate power structure in this country that has incredible wealth and incredible power. I am talking about Wall Street, where you got 6 banks that have assets equivalent to 50% of the GDP of the United States of America, over $10 trillion in assets controlled by 6 banks. I'm talking about the insurance companies who fight ferociously to prevent us from doing whatever every other major country on earth has done, guarantee health care to all people. I'm talking about the drug companies who made $67 billion in profits last year, while they charge us, in some cases, 10 times more for the same exact drugs as they do Canadians or people in Europe. I'm talking about the military-industrial complex, who now have pushed for a military budget that is more than the 10 next nations behind us combined. Which is why, by the way, we are going to end endless wars. So what this campaign is about is telling some hard truths to the American people, truths that you're not going to see on the TV or in virtually any other campaign. And that is that the only way we bring about real change in America is when tens of millions of people stand up and fight and demand that change. I'm a United States Senator, and I deal with the power of corporate America every day. Dealt with these guys for years. And I would be lying to you if I did not say that the 1% not only has unlimited amounts of money, but incredible economic power, political power, and they own the media. That's power. But at the end of the day, last I heard, that 99% is a hell of a lot more people than 1%. So if we stand together, if we don't allow Trump and his friends to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our religion or our sexual orientation, if we stand together around an agenda that works for all of us, brothers and sisters, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish, and that is what this campaign and our administration is about. Thank you all very much.